Welcome to South Florida saltwater fishing. I'm Heath, and it's time to get into the bite.
Dolphin in the boat, baby! Look at that much.
You having fun?
Nice tail fish on a white bucktail jig. And we're almost like that. That's a road right there, man.
Alright folks, in this episode we're going to go over how El Nino affects your fishing. Before we get into this though, if you want to learn more about fishing, grow as an angler, or just see some great and exciting offshore fishing adventures, you can start by hitting the subscribe button. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so that you won't miss a thing. Alright folks, so like I said, we are going over how El Nino affects your fishing. In order to do this, we have to understand exactly what El Nino is, how it forms, and what it does to our weather and ocean. El Nino is the warming of the Pacific tropical waters around the equator. In typical years, there are easterly winds, known as the trade winds. These winds push warmer waters from North, Central, and South America west towards Asia and Australia. This is where that warmer water piles up against those coastlines. Now, as this warmer water is pushed away from the east coast to the west, what happens is it is replaced by cooler, more nutrient-rich water that comes up from the deeper parts of the ocean. And this is known as upwelling. So what is upwelling and why is it important? Upwelling is the rising of nutrient-rich cooler waters from the deeper areas of the ocean. This phenomenon is good for the ocean's complicated food web. It helps microorganisms like phytoplankton thrive and grow. These organisms are critical to creating a healthy marine environment because they provide essential nutrients to fish and plant life. Not to mention that they also aid in the process of photosynthesis, which is important in helping the ocean sustain marine plant life. And this marine plant life is ultra critical because what it does is it absorbs up to 25% of the world's CO2 while simultaneously producing up to 50% of the world's oxygen. With that being said, you can see why the concept of upwelling is ultra important. So now that we understand what upwelling is, we're going to go back and keep further explaining how this correlates to El Nino. So we said these trade winds push our warmer water east, where it piles up against the coastlines of Asia and Australia. And what happens is this warmer water adds heat to the air, causing it to rise and create a more unsettled atmosphere, which produces more cloud cover and rainfall. This rising warm air creates a healthy atmospheric circulation, where the warmer, more humid air rises in the west and the cooler, drier air falls in the east. This healthy circulation in the atmosphere is what keeps these easterly trade winds naturally flowing until the phenomenon of El Nino begins. During El Nino, what happens is our easterly trade winds slow down due to changes in the tropical Pacific weather pattern. When these trade winds slow, the push of the warmer water to the west weakens, and this lessens the effect of the upwelling in the east. When this happens, the typically cooler part of the ocean tends to become warmer, and there is no longer this natural source of difference in temperature in the ocean. So what happens when the warm area of water shifts and spreads out through the Pacific is it also simultaneously moves the region of unsettled weather. And this creates a different tropical wind and rain pattern. So due to the rise of temperature in the ocean and the disruption of winds, weather patterns around the world typically change during El Nino. Now this mainly affects the tropics. In some areas it causes floods, in other areas it causes droughts. If you recall here in Florida, towards the end of 2023, heading into the beginning of 2024, we had an abnormally wet and cold winter. We also observed a couple of tropical disturbances which formed into gale force conditions. And now a couple more things about El Nino. The warm waters of the Pacific Ocean send an enormous amount of energy into the atmosphere. And this is why during El Nino years, the average temperature is elevated. if not record-setting in some places. And another observance that has been made during El Nino years is that the risk of having Atlantic hurricanes is lessened. And now what we got to understand is that each El Nino cycle is different, which means the impacts of these atmospheric and oceanic changes are also different. Our current El Nino cycle that we are experiencing started in July of 2023. It peaked somewhere between December 2023 and January 2024. And it's forecast to last until June or July of this year, 2024. This is considered to be one of the strongest El Ninos we've had in the past 50 years. As you can see by this current sea temperature graphic, almost the entire tropical zone around the equator has elevated water temperatures due to this year's El Nino. Okay, so now that we understand a little bit about what El Nino is and how it forms and develops and what it does to our atmosphere and our oceans, now we got to answer the question, how does it affect our fishing? Well, first, it affects our fishing by disrupting our weather patterns. We've had long stretches of windy periods here in Florida. This has made conditions tough to get out for several months in a row now. And when it does lay down, these windows of opportunity to get offshore and get a line in the water are short-lived. These rough weather patterns make some fishing better though, like sail fishing, while turning off some of the other pelagic fishing due to changes in the atmospheric pressure when the weather rolls through. In the ocean, the warmer water created by El Nino slowly travels from the Pacific Ocean to the Indian Atlantic Oceans by way of traversing through oceanic currents. Now, an important thing to understand about fishing is pelagic fish tend to favor these warmer, more temperate waters, somewhere between 70 and 80 degrees. Whereas the food sources like bait fish and planktons tend to like the more nutrient-rich, cooler waters where they can feed. Typically, where these two different temperate water zones meet is where you have your best fishing. Now, in some places like the west coast of North America, this warmer water is good because it pushes these pelagic fish closer to the coastline, where some anglers would typically have to travel way offshore, hundreds of miles, to find these fish if they ever even get a chance to see them. Off Florida, however, our fishing seems to be rather unaffected, if not actually enhanced a little bit by El Nino due to our protection from the Gulf Stream. The Gulf Stream is a strong driving current that circulates north. The strength of the Gulf Stream pushes this warm water developed by El Nino north, thus driving the cooler waters off to the side and in front of it. You can see in this current sea temperature graphic how the warm waters in the Gulf Stream are driven from the Caribbean up the east coast of Florida and how it pushes the cooler waters up into the Carolinas. So what it does is it leaves fish with a choice. They either use their innate sense to follow the source of food in cooler waters or move closer to the shores where the opportunity to feed exists because of fishing. During this El Nino, the warmer waters off the Florida coast have driven our hungry pelagics closer and kept them local, while simultaneously driving away some of the food source to the north with the cooler water. So this has actually made fishing in Florida better due to the lack of a natural food source. This lack of natural food source has turned on the bite for anglers. Think about the phenomenal year of mutton snapper fishing we just observed, or the exceptional wahoo bite that has lasted for well over 6 months now, that started in last June of 2023. Also, we just experienced one of the hottest sailfish bites of the last 50 years. And oddly enough, this hot sailfish bite correlates directly with the strength of our El Nino that we are experiencing compared to the last 50 years worth of El Ninos. And up north, fishing that is typically 50 to 100 miles offshore is possibly driven closer by the convergence of where the warm water is meeting with the cooler water. And this convergence of these two temperatures, remember, like I said, where the bait is and where the pelagics are, that's where your best fishing is. And that is how El Nino has affected our fishing, especially here in Florida. The weather has made it more tough to get out, but the trade-off is it's made getting into the bite easier. And just remember, every El Nino cycle is different, which means the changes in the fisheries for every El Nino cycle could be different also. Alright folks, that about does it for this episode. Hope you had fun, hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learned a little bit about how El Nino affects our fishing. Till next time, South Florida saltwater fishing, going wherever the cool wind takes us.